Welcome to Touching Base, a podcast designed to give strategic insights in a laid-back format. Here at Kline, primary research is the cornerstone of what we do. So what we'll be doing today is turning that back onto our research team and trying to get to the bottom of some of the most important topics in the personal care space today. I'm your host, Josh Mullenax, and I'm joined by Alyssa Behrendt. She's heading our research for natural personal care. So I thought it'd be fitting that that's what we will be speaking about today. Alyssa, how are we?
Hi, Josh. Thanks so much for having me. I'm well. How are you?
Oh, no complaints, no complaints. Just curious on your end, as you're doing all of these interviews with all these companies, is it been easier to reach people and to talk to people now that we're in quarantine, or have you found it to be more difficult?
It's been a bit of a mix, I've found. There are some brands that are choosing to really kind of focus down and concentrate on their own brand efforts and really looking internally to see what they can do. So they've declined. But there's also been a lot of new brands that I've been reaching out to and speaking with and that are interested in talking with me because they kind of want to hear what everyone else is saying. There's a lot of information going around online that's kind of contradictory to each other. So having one source that's kind of putting it all together has really been something that a lot of these brands are looking forward to seeing once we publish the end result.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of contradictory ideas, let's talk about natural personal care. Because I feel like there are a million different ways to define this. There's a million different ways to define clean. There's other terms now that are in the mix. And I'm sure as a marketer, it's just a headache keeping up with it all. So let's set the record straight. How does Kline define clean and natural beauty?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking to what you were saying before, it's definitely a controversial topic. There aren't any regulations from the government. Even brands and retailers, they each define it separately. But the way we define it is there's clear, consistent, and a prominent mention of natural or clean beauty across the brand. And it's really a core ingredient of the brand strategy and what they are. There's also the idea of transparency and sustainability, but natural or clean is really the primary benefit and feature far ahead of any other claims, as well as having it be a consistent core to the brand strategy for at least 2 years and on a global level. That's something we found new when we were doing our global study was sometimes natural positioning didn't really translate across different regions. So that has been something that we've been looking into as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Are there any regions that you've seen are really starting to blow up and really start leaning into the natural trend?
Well, there are some brands in the US that are actually kind of switching up their positioning a little bit. And they're brands that we're potentially looking to add to the report, but we're still trying to figure out how they fit within the scope. So there's a bit of an art there that we're still trying to finalize. And we're kind of leaning on all our subscribers and even utilizing our calls to try and figure out how they fit within. But speaking to that, conscious beauty is something that we've been seeing too. And that's where the idea of merging transparency and sustainability really comes together. And that's something that we're actually seeing a lot within the US. So that's partly why it's also becoming a bit confusing.
Yeah, and how does conscious beauty really differ from clean and natural? Is it that transparency aspect, or is there more to it?
Mm-hmm. I think Ulta Beauty really did a great job with trying to define it for the consumer by identifying different pillars as to what conscious beauty really is. So they have clean ingredients where the primary focus is excluding harmful ingredients. It's a bit controversial as to whether they're truly harmful or not. There hasn't been a ton of research there. But sustainability and transparency are also really key pillars. So like identifying where ingredients are coming from and how they're being sourced, but also just making sure that there's, focus on the environment and the potential effects that we as consumers are having on it. So those are really the main functions within conscious beauty that we've been seeing rising in natural personal care.
Yeah, that's awesome. And natural personal care is a market that has been absolutely growing over the past few years. I mean, that's not a secret to anyone in the personal care industry. But
Hmm.
I think what a lot of people are looking at now is how is it faring in the time of COVID?
Hmm. Well, it definitely varies by region, but speaking just for the US specifically, it's actually been faring relatively well. So I don't know if you noticed on your timeline and social media during quarantine, but there's been a renewed focus on the idea of self-care. And it kind of goes hand in hand with this clean beauty movement where people are paying attention to the ingredients that they're putting on their skin or rubbing into their hair, and just kind of putting on their bodies in general. It's become a lot more important to the consumer as they've taken the time to actually research ingredients and see what they're doing for them. So self-care has really become important.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes absolute sense. And I mean, behind the movement, there's hundreds of brands that are pushing it in one direction or the other. Have you found any of these brands that are really doing a good job here?
Basically, any brand that has a significant e-commerce presence, anyone who's able to rotate kind of quickly and evolve their strategy to really play into that strength, whether it be through their brand website, retailer websites, or Amazon. Um, those are the ones that are really going to be thriving and have thrived in 2020. Just the brick and mortar has been the key to success and the key to growing sales in previous years, but because so many stores were shut down temporarily for a considerable period of time, consumers really weren't able to shop those channels, so they had to seek elsewhere. And brands that were able to connect with the consumer and create a relationship, um, ultimately leading to sales online, those were the ones that were thriving.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I mean, moving into 2021, do you think that like brick and mortar might have a little bit of a comeback?
It's difficult to say. I'm interested to see how and like when a vaccine comes out, how that would play into the landscape. I still think e-commerce would take up a considerable number of the market share, just because so many consumers have become accustomed to it. They trust it now. They found sources for brand discovery and creativity, and they found different ways to manage during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think there's some people that really do miss the brick and mortar experience, but e-commerce has actually done a really great job, at least in my opinion, of really filling that gap.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to touch on what you said a little bit earlier, I mean, to kind of sum up a little bit of it was really just being agile. It seems like the brands that were agile and able to meet consumers where they were at in that moment are the ones that are doing well right now. And I can't think of a more agile company than an indie brand.
Right.
What role are you seeing these indies play in the development of this market?
I think one of the interesting things about indies that I've noticed is there were actually a ton that launched either in March or throughout the pandemic. And the fact that they've been able to survive, and really actually create an audience, I think has been quite remarkable. Uh, but they've done a fantastic job at really speaking to an audience. And I think that that's the key, is being nimble and being quick on trends and not necessarily having to go through all the corporate loopholes, that some of the other major conglomerates might have to. So it's really, trying to reach that target consumer as quick as possible and jumping on trends as quick as possible. And indies are really well poised to do that.
Yeah, no, that does sound kind of in line what we've been saying. As far as where consumers are buying, we've kind of established that we see e-commerce still being like a major factor. But do you think there's any other channels that may be become bigger than they have been in 2021 and forward?
Hmm. Well, from my interviews so far, I've heard a lot about mass retailers. So the Targets and Walmarts, especially, locations that were able to leverage those and like buy online and store pickup kind of a thing. Uh, but the surprising one that I've heard, especially for natural beauty, has actually been Costco.
Really?
So yeah, that's an interesting one. I still want to look into it a little bit more, but that has been one that I've seen rising in popularity amongst a lot of luxury brands, actually.
That's
So
so surprising. I
yeah.
need to get a Costco card so bad. Do you have one?
No, I don't. I don't have one near me, but I definitely would like one.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess just to wrap things up here, do you use any natural products? Is there anything that you can't live without?
I do, and I use it across a variety of categories. So for skincare, One Love Organics is probably one of my favorites. I used to have really dry skin and it actually repaired it. So
Okay.
like that has been a saving grace for me. Um, but in hair care, I use pretty much anything I can get my hands on. I love trying anything new in hair care just because I have curly hair. So it's always fun to try something new and see how my hair reacts to it. But yeah, like Numa Beauty and then Inner Sense are some of my favorites for there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, everyone, you heard it here first. I think that those are some good brands that anyone should try out. And thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Alyssa. We're happy to connect and talk a little bit more about the market. Otherwise, stay tuned for our next installation. Thank you, everyone. Bye.